Hello and welcome to the Smooth Scaling podcast, where we speak with industry experts to uncover how to design, build, and run scalable and resilient systems. I'm your host, José Quaresma, and today I had the pleasure of chatting to Art Huggard. Art is a digital commerce leader that worked at major e-commerce websites like Build-A-Bear and Bass Pro Shops. I really love to hear how he played crucial roles at these companies by focusing on creating great visitor experiences that can stay online no matter the demand. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast. Enjoy. Hi, Art. Welcome to our podcast. It's great to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Art, I would like to just start straight on and ask you a little bit about your career, right? So you have had a long and pretty impressive career in e-commerce. Can you just start by walking us through your career and experience?
Sure. Well, I'm originally a chemical engineer. We got my master's in IT and kind of started in the web in B2B for the Monsanto company. And then from there kind of found my way into websites. So I ran a very large website for a company called Sigma-Aldrich, which is now part of Merck. And that website went from about 400 million to almost $1 billion when we were done fixing it. But then felt like I wanted to move more into retail because a lot of the innovation in online really happens in retail. And so I worked for a Hudson Bay company in Canada and fixed their website for the bay.com and also Lord & Taylor back then, and put in place their omni-channel program. So was able to essentially, buy online, pick up in store, ship from store, and that was very successful. A lot of interesting moments there. As we spun up, we actually sold a $10,000 diamond ring as a pickup in store item in Toronto, which was fun. After Hudson Bay, I was approached by a company called Bass Pro Shops, and for a kind of well-known outdoor brand, and they were having web issues, with the websites crashing and not really realizing the revenue that they wanted. There's a lot to build with there, but they hadn't really taken advantage of everything they had. So we were able to take that website from about 200 million to 400 million when I left, and then moved back to more of a more urban area. My wife and I are more city people than country people, I guess, and came to work for Build-A-Bear. Build-A-Bear, a friend of mine was the CIO of Build-A-Bear. I'd worked with him before, and he called me up during 2016 during the holiday season, and their website was crashing once an hour, and so everybody up to the CEO was manning phones and trying to soothe customers and take orders, and I was asked to come in and fix it. So we immediately, I came and joined them in March 2017, and by October we were up and running on Salesforce Commerce Cloud. So I have 8 years at Build-A-Bear, built that business from about 6 million to 70 million, and then just retired this past year and have gone into some fractional consulting where I help companies out and help sort of get them to realize the revenue that's there that they may not be thinking about. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Wonderful, thank you. And I would, at a little bit later, I would like to go a little bit more into detail into kind of your journey in Build-A-Bear, but I would love to, before going there, to ask something a bit more broader around your experience within retail and e-commerce, since you've been in that area for a while. What would you say are the biggest changes that the e-commerce world has seen since you've started with e-commerce until now?
Yeah, I think a lot of early retail on the web tended to be maybe catalog companies. Bass Pro Shops was a catalog, and Sigma Aldrich was a catalog for scientists, and so they tended to just put the product on the web and didn't think a lot about the guest experience and the guest checkout. So, for example, when I was at Sigma Aldrich, their website for our customers in Switzerland would take 30 seconds a page to load. Uh, so they weren't really thinking about in a global environment what's my guest experience, and at Bass Pro it was the same thing. A traditional retail company, but it's like, let's just put a bunch of products on the web.
It sounds like a lot of the work that you've been involved in has been around kind of going to a company and somehow helping them scale and handle more traffic or kind of improve their setup. So was there any kind of common kind of a through line or a common aspects across them? I heard a little bit around maybe not focusing enough on the user experience to start with.
I think that's one of them, and I think the other thing that you see a lot in e-commerce is everybody's on the web and everybody's buying, so everybody is sort of an expert. Thinking about the whole experience, there's some great references. Nielsen Norman is a company that spends a lot of time on guest experience, and they put out some really great papers on how for different kinds of situations, how can you make the guest experience better. And that's what makes e-commerce fun, is because it's not only technical, it's marketing, and it's even color. What colors do you use on your web page? How does that guide your eye across the page and to what you want? There's a little bit of psychology in it,
and so maybe now we can actually get into Build-A-Bear and talk a little bit about your experience there. So you were in Build-A-Bear for over 8 years. Can you maybe walk us through your role there and how it evolved over those years?
Sure. As I mentioned, I was actually called by the CIO of Build-A-Bear. I was at Bass Pro Shops, and perfectly happy there. We were doing some great stuff at Bass Pro Shops, and he initially he would call me up while in 2016, as I mentioned, they were crashing once an hour on their website, and it was chaos. And he, November, December, he'd call me for advice, and then finally in January, late January, he says to me, "Well, would you ever move back to St. Louis?" And I said, "Yeah, I might." And he asked me to come up and join Build-A-Bear. So I interviewed with the senior team there, the CEO and all the chief officers, and really came in, heard their pain, talked to them about what a website should be doing, because in a case like Build-A-Bear, you have the web, but then you also have 300 retail stores, right? So the job of the website is not just to sell product on the web. It's also to encourage your guests to look at your product and then go into the stores. And upwards of 75% of our store guests would actually look at the website before they made a visit. Again, several of them would want to know if we had the product, so we had to implement things, like store inventory. But initially, it was just getting out of this chaotic situation and having to fix something that was really hurting the brand, and so we did a very fast project for Salesforce Commerce Cloud. I think we're about 6 to 7 months in implementation, which is insane. Usually these things are 9 months to a year. 2 websites, US and UK, and what I thought was funny is, I said to everybody, "Okay, we're going to start our meeting at midnight, and we're going to go live at midnight, 3 a.m." And they're all like, "Why are we doing that?" And I'm like, "Because you want to introduce change when most of your guests are asleep." And so those went flawlessly. Traffic checkout experience was great. We built something called the online bear builder, because when you go in or you take children in, they get that experience of picking a furry friend, picking out what they want to dress it in. So we tried to do something similar online. And when you look at Build-A-Bear, most people go, well, it's a toy company, a children's toy company, and that's was the prevailing belief, even by some of the people in Build-A-Bear. And when in reality, upwards of 30% of our guests are adults. So they're buying things like Baby Yoda as collectors. They're buying Pokemon as Pokemon collectors, and they are the people who are almost your biggest fans, and your. So it was really, once we got up and running, it was that segmentation and making it easier for those segments to come in and do what they wanted to do. That went so well, they asked me to take over some of the marketing systems. We had a Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which was a mess, honestly. The data there was duplicated, and we were getting charged way too much money for that. So we hired some really bright people and cleaned that up and tied it closer to the web experience. And then from then, we actually put in Salesforce CRM. Our guest services people were going on about 15 different systems to service our guests, so we were able to consolidate that into Salesforce CRM, and that allowed you to call in and create a case, or right from the website be able to say, hey, I need help, and get right onto and talk with a guest service rep. And then Build-A-Bear has this product where you can record your voice and put it in the bear, and the way that worked is you would buy the product, we would send you an email with a code on it, you would call the phone number, you'd punch in the code, you'd record your message, and then that message had to be listened to by somebody in our distribution center, because the last thing you want is a bear swearing or saying bad things, especially in these social media times, where
yeah.
Hey, look, I've got a Build-A-Bear, so what we did is we worked with our colleagues in another group in IT, and we took the recording where you can record right from your device, right from the website on your cell phone, and then it uses AI technology from Microsoft to go take that voice and convert it to text. And then it analyzes that text. Is it too violent? Is it too suggestive? Right?
Yeah.
And if it is, it allows us to go back to the guest and say, hey, what you just recorded violates our code of conduct, basically. Please re-record your message, right? And then the next thing we had the AI, a separate AI module, which actually checked for copyright, because a lot of people put a song in their Build-A-Bear, and if that's a copyrighted song, that could be a problem. So we had a different AI module called Audible Magic, where they tell you right away whether that's copyrighted or not. And so doing those two checks were less than 0.2 of a second. Using AI, and what allowed us to do is we no longer had to sit there and listen to the messages, so we could deliver that product right away. Instead of saying, "Hey, sorry, it's going to take us a couple days to get that before we're able to ship that product," we could ship it literally within 20 minutes after we got the order.
And then maybe just still with Build-A-Bear, we would love to talk a little bit about the fact that Build-A-Bear did bring Qt in, and it was around the COVID times. I think that was the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about what sparked that need?
I think in COVID we shut all our stores down, right? So if you wanted to buy Build-A-Bear, you had to do it on the web. And we knew we had this product, the Baby Yoda product, that was going to sell pretty well, right? And And there was, looking at social media, you could see the buzz around the product, people getting excited about it. And I had actually used Qt at Bass Pro Shops. And so initially, I said, hey, this is going to be uh, a fast-selling product. We should think about something like Qt. And to be honest, what they said is, oh, let's just try it without it and see how it goes. Well, it didn't go well. I mean, we had, the website. I mean, we were seeing upwards of 300 orders a minute, for our company, and so we had over 1,000 orders we had to go back and correct and manually handle. And so after that, they said, "What's this Qt thing you've been talking about?" And so we immediately contacted Qt. As I said, I had known them from using them at Bass Pro Shops, and got some really fast implementation out of Qt. Johnny, who's our Qt rep, has been fantastic for us. And and again, part of that is the experience. It isn't just spinning up a waiting room. It's that letting your guests know what's going on, and telling them where they are in the queue, and even when the queue's ended, letting them know what's next, or thanking them, because this product came in waves. We had 10,000. So one day I think we sold 12,000 of these. Turned the product on about 9 in the morning, and by 1 o'clock we were sold out. And so you have all these people who were in the waiting room, uh, thousands of people in the waiting room wanting to buy this product, and so we're able to say to them, hey, the waiting room's ended, but we are ordering more, and we will let you know. Sign up here if you want us to let you know when we're about to sell more. So it was that whole journey, because you had just a strong demand for the product, and Baby Yoda's kind of the extreme example, but there were several Pokemon products that had the same sort of behavior. And then you never know what's going to go viral. So there's some products we thought would go viral. We would at least turn on the forget what you call it, Qt, but it's sort of the say, hey, we want to only take 200 orders a minute, and we would just turn it on just to be safe, because you never know. And there are other products that you never expect to to really take off that do. So we would put Qt on as a precaution, and we had sort of a gargoyle uh, product that literally sold out in a couple hours. So Qt not only handles those known things, but it gives you a little bit of comfort just in case, because those. I mean, there have been some things that we never thought would would be like that, and merchandising would maybe buy 2,000 of them just to see how they went, and they'd go like in an instant. So again, when that happened, we'd say, hey, thanks. We're gonna, we will let you know. We're gonna get some more. Don't worry, and we'll let you know. What was really weird is some of the people who got in and were actually able to buy a product. There's a whole collector's market out there in Build-A-Bear, so they would buy a Build-A-Bear for $50, and they'd go out and sell it for 300. And so working with Qt, we're able to sort of say, hey, if you're through the waiting room and you're going to buy, you get to buy two. You don't get to buy 10. And so that was pretty useful for us in what we were doing. So yeah, Qt is still being used today, and it's our approach to using Qt was, like I said, we had some great support from Qt to get it up and running, but we also had sort of I wouldn't call it a war room. I guess I'd call it a defined meeting where everyone would get together ahead of time. When I put the product in, I said, okay, we're going to have to come up with a checklist. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you're going to have to think about your messages while they're in Qt. You're going to have to think of the message before Qt. You're going to have to think what happens after. And so we had marketing, merchandising, my team, um, logistics, all in a meeting where we'd kick the product off, And so what would happen is, if we wanted the product to go live at 9 o'clock, we would turn the product on. You'd have to clear all the caches so it would show up. And then once it shows up, we would place some test orders to make sure everything looked good. And then we would tell marketing, okay, you're good to send out the email. You're good to turn on the social media, and it was kind of fun because in Qt you could watch it turn on. And then when the emails went out, you'd see that waiting room really filled up, right? And so, and then when you're getting close to um, uh, running out of the product, we had a really great order management system called Ecommerce, and we worked with them, and we would actually, sort of tune down if we were allowing, say, 250 guests a minute out of the waiting room. We would start to tamp that down and try to come in as close as we could to the amount that we had. And we generally got within 40 or 50 units, and that our goal was to 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 leave it with 30 units. But when you have that sort of velocity, just using the Qt dashboards and being able to tune it right away really helped. And we would generally keep about 30 units on hand in case somebody got one that wasn't quite right, or had a problem with their order, and so we could ship it to them. But yeah, generally, I would say Qt is a big part of why Build-A-Bear was able to go from where it was to a company that is really part of the popular culture, and selling products like Baby Yoda and like Pokemon, and like the Gargoyle, and just it sort of allowed the company to really grow and sell with a product where you're getting a good experience. You know.
And out of curiosity, I think you referred to before Qt that you were hitting, I think you mentioned around 3,000 orders per minute. Was that the right number? I think that where we start getting some problems. Where was the bottleneck then? Was it in the kind of the payment gateway, or was it kind of from somewhere else in the system? Do you remember?
Some of it was in Salesforce itself, even though we had told Salesforce that we were doing a flash sale. Some of it early on was in the order management system, being able to grab that volume of orders. Um, in fact, early on, we had to sort of rely on the Salesforce numbers and not the order management numbers. And then after that first experience, then our order management partners were like, "Hey, we're gonna make this a whole lot better," and they did. Um, so yeah, it was just because the speed that you can pass your order to your order management system is important, right? Because then the customer, you've got an order, you definitely know the customer is checked out, and so those tended to be where our bottlenecks were. And like I said, the first time we had no Qt, that was a mess. And then when we started running Qt, things ran really well. But it tended, on the Salesforce side, it tended to be database speed, just and then on the order management side, it was just mainly the API, because you're passing orders from Salesforce Commerce Cloud to DecOMS, and uh, making sure that API is got enough resources to handle that kind of volume. And they were cloud based also, so that was like a 5-minute exercise for them to. And they were a good partner. They were on those calls also that I talked about, where everybody got together. They were there, and if we said, "Hey, this looks kind of slow," they would tune it right away. So it wasn't just the different functions in Build-A-Bear. It was us also working with our vendor partners.
And you also mentioned, so still kind of within the peak event area, but you also mentioned Best Pro Shops that you had worked on before and also used Qt. Was there I believe you were director of e-commerce there at Best Pro Shops.
Yeah.
Was there any major differences on how Qt was being used between the two?
No, it was kind of funny because Bass Pro Shops, again, is very outdoor, fishing, hunting, camping kind of company. And when I was at Bass Pro, several of the ammunition suppliers had issues with their plants. They actually shut the plants down. And there's a caliber of ammunition called 22s, which is fairly popular. People will target shoot with those. And so there was a belief out there in the market of people who said, hey, I'm not going to be able to get any ammunition to go target shoot or to go hunt. So we were able at Bass Pro Shops to source that because we had great vendor partners. So we actually put up, a bucket of 22 rounds, and same sort of thing killed the site because of the rush of people trying to buy. We approached Qt. Again, Qt did a great job of spinning things up and working with us to get the sort of the waiting room experience as flawless as possible. And it was kind of funny because when I was at Build-A-Bear, our CEO Sharon Price John said that's great how the waiting room thing worked. And she goes, how did you think of that? And I said, well, I used to sell 22 ammunition the same way. So it's like it's taking something that works in one sector of retail and moving it to another.
Yeah.
So it was, it was just, my having experience with Qt, having that good experience at Bass Pro Shop. You guys were the first people I thought of when we had the Baby Yoda problem. Right?
Thank you. And kind of just, I know that we're kind of getting closer to our time, but before we wrap up, I would like to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. So don't just share whatever comes to mind. So is there a kind of book, podcast, a specific person, thought leader that you would recommend to our audience?
AI snake oil is something that I'd recommend to really get a balanced view of what AI. Now, AI is good at, if you're looking at large language models, it's great at SEO. It's great at sort of creative things, like take this Build-A-Bear photo and put it in a Halloween setting, stuff that you can get done. You see Adobe embracing it in their suite. So AI snake oil would be the one thing. And then again, this YouTube podcast. Stanford Business School also has a couple really great AI podcasts in there. It's actually an economics course, so I'd recommend people. They're free. I'd recommend people watch.
And is there any or what professional advice would you give your younger self, or someone starting right now in this field?
I think to get out there and look at sort of the research that's going on, right? Like we talked about earlier, a lot of people, they go home, they use a website, and they have a certain feeling, right? And but there's a good body of research, like Nielsen Norman is a very research-based company. They early on they actually came up with the theory about how your eye scans across a web page, right? And that's very important because you want your important items to be in the part of the page that you're going to be looking at. So to go out and get that research background, stay up to date with the new tools that are coming out and where they could be useful, but don't go. And I guess the other thing I would say is don't believe everything that a salesperson will tell you, right? Because Popular one is you can implement this without any IT help, and I've never seen a product do that. But and then just think about where your guests are. What's important to them. Buying is a very emotional experience. You buy something because you feel something about that product or that company, and so how are you representing your company in the areas that are important.
Last question. To you, scalability is?
Scalability is the ability to immediately sell faster than you did yesterday when you need to, right? And when we talked about how Q enabled our scalability, but also how we had to work with Salesforce and our OMS vendor to be able to scale. So when that demand came in, we could immediately scale it up. And so I'm a big fan of cloud-based systems, as you can tell. And early in my career, the systems were on-prem, and I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. Microsoft Cloud, the Amazon Cloud, just places where you can, just go in and say, hey, I need 30% more CPU power, and you got it.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Art, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this episode of the Smooth Scaling Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing and perhaps share it with a friend or colleague. If you want to share any thoughts or comments with us, send them to smoothscaling@qit.com. This podcast is researched by Joseph Thwaites, produced by Perseu Mandillo, and brought to you by Qit, your virtual waiting room partner. I'm your host, José Quaresma. Until next time, keep it smooth, keep it scalable.